Well, it's Monday. So, oh, yeah, it's going to be that kind of day, too. I just moved my foot and kicked over a couple of things. But that's kind of, hi, Ole. Wow, you're on early today. I hope that, yeah, well, you're there, so I know you survived all of your driving. I hope you have well, you probably won't. You probably won't have a more relaxing week this week because everybody still has practice. And how did practices go last week? No, that's good. I hope that's good that you got off work early. Sometimes getting off work early, I don't know, things like get shut down or something. But um, I got off work early on Friday. I quit about 1 o'clock. In fact, I'm thinking maybe you can give some feedback on this. I'm thinking of changing the streaming from like 10 until 1 with only a very short break in between. I mean, like a 10-minute break instead of doing what I'm doing. I don't know if that would make any difference to anybody or not, but I think it would be easier for me to do that. 2 skating practices on Sunday. So were they like practice tournaments, or just practice in between lessons? I'm glad you're on early. This way I get to chat with you instead of doing anything on the models. This is my work, and so not working is always a good thing. I actually had a relaxing weekend. Yeah, they let me have Saturday afternoon off. I didn't have to do anything. I didn't have to cook. I didn't have to do any cleaning. I just sat out on the screen porch and um, took a little nap, really. It was really quite nice. Oh, my. Wow. There's a big gap in between. You just end up, I think I asked you once before, when something like that happens, do you end up just staying there between the morning practice and the evening practice, or do you go home? Is it close enough to be able to drive back and forth? So if anyone is watching this like on YouTube or whatever, check Ole Brager's YouTube site. He does amazing modeling things. So I have to advertise for him. He really does really well. Oh, a half hour is not too bad. Yeah, out here where we are, if we want to go to a big box hardware store or something, it ends up being that long anyway. Being in kind of a rural area, everything's far away. Well, that's not bad then. I mean, and I'm just saying a half hour drive isn't too bad. So that's good. I'm thinking of, maybe you can give me feedback on this. I'm thinking of changing the stream schedule from, instead of 10 to 2 with an inordinately long break in between, because that always happens, of just going from maybe 10 until 1 with one short break. I don't know. But do you think that would work? I'm just asking for feedback. So anybody who has feedback on that, not just Ole, if anybody has feedback on that, let me know. I haven't talked with the rest of Dyson Dungeons yet, especially the DM, Alexa, who is in charge of everything. I haven't talked with them yet about changing the streaming, but I'm thinking, I don't know, it just might be easier for me, and then I have a little bit longer in the afternoon. Um, no, when I take that break around noon, I end up I should eat something and I usually don't. So sometimes, there's like a bio break, right? But yeah, it like a bio break for like 10 minutes or something, just to get a fresh cup of coffee, maybe, and do that. So I'm thinking that probably because I take that longer break, I might be losing people anyway. And most of the chat comes in before, a lot of it is like between 11 and 1. And so a couple of times I've just not even taken that break at noon because there's people in chat. So it's just something I'm thinking about. Yeah, the others are online on when we play the game. They don't show up on this. Nikki used to paint with me. We actually had a setup with two cameras, so we sat side by side here on the workbench back when there was actually room on the workbench, and we would do some things together. And I really enjoyed that. That was kind of fun. We could banter between each other if there wasn't anybody on chat. Um, but yes, Alexis is our dungeon mistress, and she doesn't paint. Yeah, I need to talk to her into doing that, especially if we get a bunch of dungeon tiles or something, or maybe a whole passel of minifigs. I think she enjoys not doing anything in the morning like this. But yeah, Nikki used to paint with us a little bit now and then, and David, who plays nines, are tabaxi but transformed by a curse into a badger bard, talks about painting sometimes. He has a couple of figures that he wants to paint, but has a day job, so has to take some time off in order to show up on this stream. So, what I'm thinking, yeah, having Nicole, and it would be good. Actually, it would be a good thing to set this up for two people again, because I've virtually eliminated my workspace by not cleaning up. I was kind of shocked when I came down here today. I shouldn't have been because it's how I left it on Friday. But I wasted all Saturday afternoon just sitting around relaxing instead of cleaning this up. But I have enough to work on for what I'm doing today. But boy, I really, really need to do some straightening up and putting away. So I'm gonna talk with her about that. I 120 mini. Oh my. Pretty good. That would keep us busy for a good long time. I'll have to look into that. Or actually, I don't look into it. I'll make Alexis look into it. So you're painting the minis? Are you going to be painting the minis on your stream? The command module. Look, here's the parts for the command module. And I have to say, I've actually made I think, what's going to be a breakthrough on the control panel. I was able to find like 6. Your pile of shame. I have, I keep talking about this. I bought all these models when I first retired. Okay. I thought when I retired, I would be really bored silly. And I built models as, when I was in elementary and high school. And so I bought I went on eBay and started buying models. Some of them are really pretty cool, like the Deep Space Nine with fiber optic lighting and things like that, and a whole lot of 1/48 World War II and post World War II models. I even have a gigantic V2 rocket with, one of these cutaway things that shows the inside. Why I bought that, I have no idea. It's 1/15th, 1/16th scale, so it stands about 3 feet high, which would make it another one of those models I have no way of displaying. And the submarine and the Apollo are already in those categories. So what you say you have your pile of shame, but I have 1, 2, 3, 4 shelves, and they're not small shelves. They're like 4 feet wide by 1.5 feet deep. 4 shelves of shame. Yeah, I really thought that would be fun making all of these, but then I never got around to it until I actually started doing this stream. So this is coming along okay. I got the detail on the parachute container section thing here going. And I don't know if this is accurate or not, but the brown things are the parachute shrouds. And these are like the red things I'm saying are explosive mortars that launch the parachutes, because each one has one and they look like they're attached to the parachute cords. And these are containers for the pilot chute and the drogue chute. And then this is, I don't know, wiring and stuff. And this is the hatch, the airlock and the hatch that goes between the command module, once it's assembled here, the command module and the lunar module. So there's that. And I found some pictures of the control panels that are just pictures. And I'm quite sure now that I will be able to get them to be the right size for these panels. They've got the main control panel, and there's little wings. There's little wings here that contain controls as well. And then for the first time, I found what's supposed to go here. None of the control panel pictures included this section, which goes underneath this. Okay, like that. But I found it, and I think I'll be able to. It doesn't exactly look like this, but I think I'll be able to do that. But I'm not sure how long it's going to take, because I have to manipulate the pictures so that they're the right size and the right orientation, and then get some really good quality sticky backed paper, like high quality shipping label kind of paper, so that I can print it out and apply it. And then it will look okay, and then I can finish this. But this got painted. You can see it's got the really nice pearlescent white on it. I think that's a really good paint color. So I'm going to unmask this and install the windows. And at the pace I work, that may end up taking the entire stream today. I don't know. The other thing I'm going to try to do is install the door. This is a pin-hinged door. You can see the pins there. See the pins up and down. And I think the way this is supposed to work, like a lot of folding doors, like your closet doors, is that the big pin goes into the upper hole far enough, at least theoretically, that the bottom pin can go into place, and then it slides down. And it looks like that should be possible. And I hope I can do that without breaking it. But I think the inside of the door came out okay, because I got the window installed with a little window frame. So without further ado, I'm going to take this off of the cardboard on which it was attached for spray painting. put this over to the side where it's going to be in the way, just adding to the perpetual messiness. And then take the tape and stuff off of this and start playing around with the windows. The other thing is that I got expert advice from Nicole, who is actually a real artist, about painting the moon. So this was just painted the gray primer. And she said, well, what you want to do is you want to layer colors on this to make it look less just yucky. And so I did. I sprayed a little bit of brown. There's some undercoating of brown on here. And then sort of from the side, you can actually kind of see this. It actually shows up on the screen. It didn't before. Is spray it from the side. The light is coming in this direction. Just spray paint it from the side to give it to highlight here and here, and so on. And then what I'm going to do yet to really help make this look good is use some wash and paint the shadows on the insides of the craters. I don't know. This is looking okay the way it is. In some ways, I think I might just leave it like this. I don't know if I want to paint the shadows or not. I could mess it up. I might. I don't know. I'm not really sure. But here I'm I taped the edges because I didn't want to do that. But you can see the color here. The whole thing was just that dark gray, and now it's a lot more moony than it was. Anyway, I'll decide what I'm going to do that later. Maybe it's one of those things where it should just be left well enough alone. Now let me take this apart. There, that was easy, wasn't it? Just done. Oh yeah, I need to paint that little bit. That little bit needs to be painted the color of the heat shield because it hangs over the side and it abuts it. So I have to do that. Oh, the other thing I learned, this was good news, this was bad news kind of, is that these indentations are in fact rocket nozzles. These are attitude control jet nozzles. And the model on the cover of the box, which was made by some sort of superhuman master modeler, did not paint these. They're just white. But when I looked at pictures of the real Apollo command modules, they are black because they're little rocket nozzles. I am not going to try that. This came out really quite well in terms of even color and everything. And I know that if I tried to paint those, I would get paint outside of the circle. Okay, they would not be perfectly circular. And I wouldn't be able to fix it without practically restarting the whole thing. So I feel a little badly about that because they really should be painted black, like they would be rocket nozzles. But I have to be realistic and say it's not within my skill level. The other thing I could do, there's a couple of things I could potentially do. One is if I could get a mask, like a piece of paper or light cardboard and punch a hole, that would be perfectly circular and perfectly that size. I could just spray a little black paint on it, right? Yeah, I don't know. If I get compulsive in the future, I might try that. The other is that if I could find little adhesive black dots that were exactly that size, and sometimes you can find those like made to be little eyeballs or something. But if I could find little adhesive black dots, then I could just put them on. But as it is, I'm going to have to knot. You can see here with this pearlescent paint, which gives it a nice surface look. You can just see on the tape here that it doesn't really cover. It's translucent. You'd have to put tons and tons of it on. So against the white primer, applied to the white primer, it looks fine. But if there's anything underneath it, it doesn't work that well. So I just wanted to say that's just another part of this model that is a little bit of a challenge, and I'm not going to push my luck. Need the tweezers to get this stuff. Might need these for applying the windows too. These windows are a lot less challenging than the lunar module and the door. The door was kind of challenging because it was a circle, and cutting out the circle or the approximation of a circle was a little bit difficult. And the way it's assembled, you can see both the inside and the outside. But the way this is done, this is trash that needs to go someplace. Probably put it over here where I stick my fingers on it later, and it's not what I wanted. I need this. I need that for something in a bit. In the door, you can see both the inside and the outside, and so I had to be very careful in applying it. But in this, I'm going to be looking through the hatch, okay, and will not be able to see the inside of these windows, and so I just need to make sure that they cover the opening, that they don't get clouded up with the adhesive, and that they stick. Somehow I managed to accumulate a whole pile of torn pieces of paper towel. Like, instead of using one I had before, I just kept getting more and more. Thanks for joining in, Ole. I appreciate it, and have a good day. Enjoy your getting off of work early day. See you. The way these windows work is that the model came with a sheet of clear plastic, kind of like this. Okay, this is the remnants of the top of a carry-out container. There was hardly any of it. It was only a piece about this big. And the windows were all supposed to be cut out of that. And I said, no, I'm not going to use it right away because it might not work. And it turned out that the ones for the lunar excursion module they just didn't work at all. They were the wrong shape and the wrong size. So it was a good thing that I didn't. But now I've got more of it. And I've got 4 little windows. These are the templates for the windows. They look pretty straightforward. They look like they're way too big. I'm going to give it a go. Cut them out, see if they fit. And if they fit, then I will attach them with this clear canopy cement, which doesn't hold all that well. Okay. It doesn't grip as well as, say, contact cement. But I'm hoping that, that no one pokes the windows out. If they don't poke the windows out, then it should be enough. It just needs to keep them from falling off. I made copies of these. These were in the inside of the instruction manual. And a good thing I made many copies. I ended up using quite a few of them for the lunar module. If I use them just as is, it will be a big waste of plastic. So I can do this in two ways. I can cut pieces of plastic out to roughly that shape, and what I do is I attach them with rubber cement to the template, okay, around the outside, and then cut it because I want this has to stick to this in order for it to work. Well, I am going to be kind of lazy about this. I'm going to cut this piece of good plastic. Okay, and just attach it. I have another chunk here if I need it, if this doesn't work. I'm going to put rubber cement around the periphery of each of these and then cut them out. And hopefully they will work. I've learned through trial and error, mainly error, that with rubber cement, the worst thing is to try to use this brush. Okay, it's a big brush. You've all seen this. It's a really big brush. This whole thing gets covered in cement. You try to move it to the work surface, it's dripping all over the place. Your fingers touch that. It's just really messy. But rubber cement is, I found, a really useful thing. Even to hold pieces together, not just temporarily like this. Just putting it around the periphery here so that it holds the plastic kind of in place as I cut it, as I go around the edges. Saying this is a really, cool thing to do or not. I'm just saying it sort of works for me because if the plastic moves while it's being cut, then then the shape is off. And this sort of worked with the circle, and then sort of failed with the circle. Anyway, it's a relaxing, and I'm saying, kind of worthwhile thing to be doing. The low risk kind of activity. But once I'm done with these windows, if I can get the door in without breaking it, then the Apollo is going to be set aside for a while until I get the control panels printed and applied. And once those are done, then I'll finish the whole thing. At some point, I need to put the housing, we'll call it that, the housing thing for the LEM together. I've been resisting that because it will then stand about 10 inches tall, and I don't have a way to store it. I don't have a way to store any of this. All the pieces of the Apollo are in little boxes scattered around. Make this flat. There's like raised edges on either side of this, and that is going to be, it's just going to be in the way. Okay, I'll give this a go. Six. Oh, okay. As I'm doing this, I suddenly recalled what happened the last time I tried to make a backup window for the door, the circular window. What I did was, as I was cutting it out, I lost, I dropped it and it fell on the floor and disappeared. And so I should do this over a box, but I'm going to do it over a cone. I'm going to be cutting these out. They look, I'm going to cut on the inside of the line. Well, I can always make them smaller. That's something I have to say is when you're doing something like this, keep in mind you can always make it smaller, but you can't make it bigger. Why is that important? Because if you make it too small, you just got to throw it away and start over. And we're cutting it right on the line. Okay, so I have a window, one of these. And it goes there on that flat surface. What I'm going, yeah, that's what I'm afraid of here. Is I actually do need to make it a little smaller because, okay, one will be looking through this hatch, okay, and you can look over to the side. And what I was seeing was, I was a little concerned about that because of the size, is that if this extends beyond, I don't know if you can see that, but the edge of the plastic is showing, and I don't want it to show. I want this to be the size of that flat spot and not extend over the edge. And I also don't want it to become too small. It just doing it on the inside here, but it managed to go flying anyway. Unlike this. Yep, it's on the floor. I think I saw where it landed. I really want to retrieve this piece. What happened was that it was like a tiddlywink. Okay, I'm holding it with the tweezers, and it slipped off the edge and just. And it's not like I can't make another one, but I don't want to keep wasting that plastic. This is why I'm using box tops, extra pieces instead of the real plastic, because that, okay, I lost it. I like threw it away basically. Just I'm grumping in my frustration here. This is also why I have extra ones of these, because because of that, because I managed to lose it. That was just amazingly, not just amazingly dumb. And I actually should have seen it coming, because it had flipped off of the tweezers before. This will work. Just an extra piece that was laying around. There's nothing to lose here by trying. Yeah, that actually fits better than the piece that it was supposed to be. I'm going to use that. Do is great white on white. I keep dropping it. Oh my, this is absurd. There. Right. It's transparent. Sorry, I'm struggling with this. It's transparent, and it fell onto this paper towel that I've got, and I've got a paper there, and it flopped again. There has to be a better way of doing this. It falls onto the paper towel and disappears. So what I'm discovering here is that there's no good way to hold these things while they're being installed. Trying to clean it off. I disappeared it. There it is. Transparent. Transparent means you can't see it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try to just put this on, because every time I touch it is an opportunity for it to disappear. For a toothpick, there's one. Be cement. It's supposed to be absolutely clear when it dries. There. I don't want there to be too much of it. I want there to be enough to hold this when it comes in contact with it, but not so much that it will like ooze out. Okay, you know what I mean? Ooze underneath the surface onto the surface of the window. I think that'll do. These other tweezers would work better. Just keeps jumping around. Grip it like this because I want it to not extend. I want it to not extend beyond the frame next to the door. Trouble with this, do you think? You think? They take too much of the. Yeah, there. I finally got it in position, but there isn't any adhesive. Okay. So I failed. Okay. I thought this would be like really fast, just a real quick and simple thing to do to get these windows installed, but as it is, it's turning out to be difficult and a real challenge. It's just not sticking. No, it didn't fall off. Maybe it grabbed that time. Okay, well, one window installed. So you can see it from the outside, and some of the cement, of course, got onto the surface. Yay. I don't know what to say. It is what it is. Do another. I'm going to do this other one now. This. Sorry, this is my monologue is failing here because of that. I hope it stays on. Um, at least it'll be a while before I put this together. What I mean by putting it together is it'll be a while before I attach that to the rest of the model, which means that if it's going to fall off, it will have plenty of opportunity to do that between now and then. Transparent on white. The only thing I really got to go on is activity of it. Use another window, and I will see if this one fits. Maybe I won't see it. Seeing it has been kind of the problem, hasn't it been that? Yeah. Too big at the bottom. This is kind of hilarious that this is becoming such a thing, such an issue, such a difficulty. Actually, it is just a combination of it being small and slippery and transparent. Weirdly located. And it fell. It had to have fallen inside the cone. Just, I can't, oh, there it is. It stuck to the side. There's a little bit of staticiness. I guess that was a helpful thing at that moment. It was almost easier doing it from the inside because it's at an angle. It's not laying flat. It's angular there. I'm just trying to see if it's even the right size. Okay. If I can get it attached, it will be okay. This is this should have been really easy. I mean, it really just should have been simple beyond belief, but it's not. Like I'd like there to be a different way of doing this, but I can't think of any. If it sticks, it'll be okay. It looks okay from the outside, and I can't see it. It's okay when I look at it from there and there. Covers as long as it covers the opening. Well, now I've got these square ones, and you would think that these square ones would be easier, but they're not. It's on a round surface. It's curved. There's nothing for it but to try one. It could hardly be worse, right? Need too large. The side of the line because it's actually a little too big. To hold it. Oh, to clean it. Take like an hour and a half to get these little windows on. Just amazing. Um, it fits pretty well. Made it a little too small. Well, see how this goes. Well, you know, that's not it. That's the wrong piece. That's why it didn't fit. They're going to take before it grips. Okay, I'm going to sit here and hold this for a couple of minutes. You can see the top of my head. I'm leaning over, holding this window down because it's in the right position. But when I let up the pressure, it pulls away from the cement, the canopy cement, because it's not flat. It's a curved surface. So I'm going to count to 120. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If I had a timer, I wouldn't have to do this. and I'm going to get really impatient and annoyed. Um, so what can I talk about while I'm doing this? I can talk about the this this really isn't the best way to do this. I think, these little pieces of plastic for the windows. They make nice windows and they don't protrude. They're very thin, kind of authentic almost, but none of them have been easy to put in. I thought these would be really, really simple. Like just cut out a piece, stick it on, right? Flat surfaces. But the flat surfaces near the door were hard to get to because of the angle. And these flat surfaces aren't flat um, because they're curved. Yeah, that was kind of gibberish, but that's the way it is. And this cement just starting to hold. Well, if I'm going to be here holding this in place for another forever, let's talk about Dyson Dungeons. Dyson Dungeons is a group of family and friends, and we're all about a Dungeons and Dragons show. And the Dungeons and Dragons show streams on Twitch with a live chat, something like 3 Sundays a month. We didn't stream yesterday. So you need to check the schedule and see. Twitch said that it would, but it didn't. So I don't really know what to say about that other than that we do try to stream 3 Sundays a month at 2, and social media should say when that is, and that's with a live chat. And then you can always catch episodes on YouTube or as a podcast. And either way, they're very entertaining. And so, yeah, Dyson Dungeons is about Dungeons and Dragons. It's not about building models. This is kind of a spin-off. Okay, it's like I don't know. Petticoat Junction was a spin-off of Green Acres, I guess, or what spin-offs of Happy Days. Joni Loves Chachi was, I think, a spin-off from that. Maybe Mork and Mindy was even. I don't remember exactly. But it's kind of a spin-off that happened by accident and just kept on because why not? So this originally started as we were painting dungeon tiles and minifigs for a D&D show, and then when we didn't have any of those, I was told, well, keep the stream going, make a model. So I built a submarine, and now I'm building an Apollo, and after I'm done with the Apollo, I'm going to build Porco Rosso's plane. Okay, I don't know how that's going to hold, but it didn't fall out. It's not. It is what it is. It is what it is. So I've got one more of these to go. Be glad when it is done. I expected it to be a little easier and less entertaining, even less entertaining than it is. It is to say not at all. So yeah, it started out as a spin-off. We ran out of dungeon tiles, and so started making a model, and the latest model is this Apollo. Yeah, the latest thing that's going on the Apollo are these little plastic windows. And about all I can say is that they haven't fallen. and they're transparent and hard to see and very difficult to manipulate. But other than that, it's been, pretty straightforward. After I get this window on and hold it in place, I mutter on about something for a couple of minutes while the cement sets enough so that it holds it. To paint this tiny little bit down there. I need to paint that the color of the heat shield. Okay, and then I'm going to hold this down like this. So it might not be as bad, but I'm going to hold it anyway for about a minute. So yeah, Dungeons and Dragons, and doing models because I didn't have any dungeon tiles to paint, and I'll show you some in a little while because I like to show those off. But mainly, I've been working on these models that I accumulated when I retired because I was told that would be, sort of entertaining. I've been having real problems with adhesives building these models. So I'm not going to resort to what I used when I was in grade school. The tube cement that's really viscous. And if you take a little bit of it out of the end of the tube, because the tube didn't have this really fine needle point aperture, it was just probably like 1/8 of an inch in diameter. It's pretty big. You had to squeeze out the blob and use a toothpick or a pin to grab some and spread it around on the model. And since it was so viscous, it made these spider webby things. And so there were spider webs of cement everywhere. And the cement dissolved the plastic. So if the spider webs touched anything, it would dissolve it and leave marks all over the place. So that tube cement was really difficult to work with. The liquid cement is a lot easier to work with, but I think they changed the formula so it was less toxic or something. And I found that some of it just doesn't hold at all, even under pressure for a while. I've had parts fall apart, including one of the parts on this that I need to re-cement. So the brush-on cement seems even more prone to that than the applicator. And this canopy cement, I guess it's okay. It's holding. The thing I found actually works best is contact cement, but that's really hard to work with too, because it's really thick and jelly-like. Okay, well, that's what they look like from the inside, and they don't look terribly great on the inside, but they look okay from the outside. So if you can see the reflections, yeah, you can see that the windows are actually in the window frames because they are reflecting light. And they're not, they're showing flaws. But they're in, and hopefully they will stay in and not fall out. I'm going to have to do some significant cleaning up here. I've got all sorts of little bits of paper and plastic and stickiness on my fingers. Okay, it's sort of hard to explain why I need to cover that without bringing the extra piece out. But trust me, that needs to be painted the color of the heat shield. Well, let me just show you. This is the heat shield, which should be a different color. It should be darker, really, but it isn't. So when the heat shield is attached, it's like that. It doesn't fit very well. It is one of those pieces that just doesn't fit very well. Sort of the way it's supposed to be. See how that protrudes off the end there? Well, the thing is that that was an opening, and I filled it in. It's not perfect, but it's, at least it's not open anymore. And why that's there and why it was open, I don't know. But you can just see that if this came down and that was an opening, that the superheated gases would flow through there right into the command module. So I don't think that the command module was designed to do that. I don't think that was like a heat source or something. This doesn't fit. Okay. It just doesn't. I've played with this over and over and over and over and over and over and over, and it just does not fit. It's never going to. So when I finally attach this, it's going to be a compromise. Just try to get it to look, as symmetric on here as I can, without getting cement on everything and causing it to ooze out and mar the surface. Anyway, I need to find this color and paint that color, paint that this color. And what I actually should do, I really should, is you can see there's sort of a grayish green color around the edges, is I probably should paint that this color as well, but I'm not going to, because the brush could slip and then it'll get on the pearlescent surface. I'm going to mess with that. So I have to figure out what color that is. We got these paints over here. Hold on. When I filled this in, I actually thought ahead, so I'm a little bit clever, is the spray paint that I'm going to use. This is spray painted, right? The spray paint solvent dissolves the paint. And so if I were to say paint it on this blue, it would dissolve the blue from underneath. And so I filled this in, but I didn't paint it. I masked it when I did the rest of the painting. I masked it so that it's just the surface. And so I think I can safely paint it without melting anything else. So it's this color. I'm going to spray just a little bit of it into this container. And then brush it on, just so it matches the rest of the heat shield. I don't have any brush on version of this. Ventilated, right? It needs to be well ventilated. I think this should be enough. I just want to paint the surface of this whitish color. Got it. At least it's going to look close. It'll look closer than if I didn't do this. Let's paint the inside here a little bit and get a little bit more of this. Needed just here. Goes over the heat shield. Not perfect. The plastic filler I used is far from perfect, but it's working. Okay. So the last thing that needs to be done on this before I put it away, along with the rest of the parts that will eventually be assembled when I get the control panels done. Okay. When that eventuality happens, is I'm going to try to install the door. It's just a little denatured alcohol. Not denatured, it's isopropyl actually. It's just rubbing alcohol, which works as a little better paint cleaner than water on this spray paint. It's just a different solvent than the acrylics. Even though it is an acrylic, the propellant is different and all that. They're up. You can't hear them because the microphone filters stuff out, but there they are. And then you're going to watch me attempt to clear off the work surface of all of this debris that has accumulated. Hopefully that's a happy sound. So that after I get the door installed, assuming I do that without breaking anything, big assumption at that point always, then I can do a couple of things. I can either try to work on the moon surface, but I'm thinking I kind of like it the way it looks now. I could work on the Sylvia, or I could quit early, stop early. Okay. I've been joined by a tiny little spider. Right. So this is a pin hinge, and the way these usually work is that it goes to its opening high enough for the bottom to slide into its opening, and then it slides down. So close there. Oh, look. It's not a perfect fit, and a little bit of the blue shows around it, but the door is supposed to open outward. Yeah, not inward. Yes, that's just not good. That's not good at all. We'll try it this way. sure if I can do this without breaking something. It's so close to working. It's so close. There. But it opens. Damn it. It only works going the wrong way. This is how long I'm going to be messing with this. Yeah, see, the thing is, so close to being okay. It's so close to. No, if I force it, it's going to break the pin off. See, the door works. Okay. But I can get it in if it swings from the inside because of the way this thing is angled. But trying to get it in from the outside, it is like the tiniest little bit of a fraction of a millimeter. Being able to slide that on. And if I push it, I know that if I push it, this whole pin will break off. If I made it tiniest little bit smaller, I could probably get it to fit, but then it might not hold. If the door swings inward, and I can get it to do that, I can't get it to swing outward, which makes no sense. It should swing both ways, right? So very, very close. It is so fragile. And if that pin breaks, then the whole thing is lost. And then it isn't going to work at all. Then I have to cement the door. I don't know what to do. I got it to work before that one time, and then it just swung the wrong way. It was like, oh yay, but not. Yay, but not. Okay, I hate to do this, but I think I need to take off an infinitesimal little bit. Pin. Here I am, doing some major fumbling. Somehow, tiniest little bit of clearance. Suppose I can get it in from the outside. I'll try. Can't. Maybe it'll work better. I don't want to break off the top pin. Wow, just. If I make this too small, it's not going to work. And like I have said a million times, you can make things smaller, you can't make things bigger. I'm not going to mess. If I can't get this to work now, I'm not sure what, if anything, I can do. Maybe I could sand down the thing into which it is being attached. So close. I know I'm going to break something by holding it like this too. I think there's like this little ridge on the inside there where the plastic is a little higher. No, this is taking a good long time that I wasn't expecting to take. I haven't even talked about Tom Terrific or 60s cartoons or anything interesting. It's just been struggling with little bits, the little final little bits of the command module here. Opens and closes, and it looks okay. There's a little bit of blue around the outside, but it kind of fits. Okay, doesn't fit perfectly, but it does. And you can open the hatch now and look on the inside. I am going to put this down and not touch it again. I just don't want to mess with it. Okay. These are the bits that that are ending up going on here. The this goes here, okay, and there is. I want to fill that in. I'm tempted to cement this on and finish that, but I see there's this non. I mean, it's fine for the model, right? You want that to be aligned, right? How do you open the hatch when the model is completed? There's no doorknob on it. I'm going to leave the hatch slightly ajar. The door is ajar, okay, because in order to open it, you need to get into it like that. So the door is going to be ajar. This fits on here, and for the purpose of the model, there's an alignment tab, but that that probably did not exist in the real model. So I'm really tempted, once this is cemented on, to tape this up, put some filler in, and paint it that color, which is, I believe, duraluminum. It's whatever this is. Yeah, duraluminum. Windows haven't fallen out. The door is ajar. It hasn't fallen out. I should stop playing with it. So in terms of detail, I've got the instrument panels that I want to put appliques on so that they look like real instrument panels and not just blue stuff like this. This I might fill in, just that little notch, to fill it in, okay, after it's cemented in, and then painted the duraluminum color so that it doesn't look like there's a notch there. Once that's in place, this thing goes over it like this. Slides down onto it so that it covers the nose cone, but the hatch shows through, because this is the docking module, the docking state tunnel. And then when it's launched, this covers it. And then this is jettisoned after it's in orbit. You got the alignment tab that lets it go on only one way. I've done this before. Why can't I do it again? The parts aren't going to fit. There we go. Yeah, so it fits together like that, and it looks sleek. Looks like the command module. These little prongs are where the escape tower goes. Okay, they attach here. And I just put those in there so paint didn't get in them. I could probably take them out now. To put a door stop in there. So once the thing is launched, then the escape tower shoots off. This comes off, exposing the airlock and docking module. Okay. And then after the mission is completed and it's about to land, then this shroud comes off. It's supposed to come off. There. Sticking. Hopefully it won't stick forever. Once this is cemented in, then this comes off. Exposing the parachutes so the parachutes can come off so that it can land without, crashing. There. One of those has black ink in it. It's to help. The escape tower only goes on in one orientation. Okay, and it's got one of the little probes, one of the prongs on the escape tower has a little black ink on it as well. Come off with some difficulty. I might need to file those tabs down a little bit so that they don't grip quite so tightly. They should just slide on and off. Anyway, that's how it works. So I'll leave that in to keep the door ajar. So just leave this sit on there. Doesn't, as long as the box door closes, doesn't hurt anything. So these bits get installed here. Yeah. Carefully, very uncarefully bounced my hands around. These bits go in here. They have instrument panel appliques on before I do this. And then they're supposed to line up like that. And then the astronaut couch. Yeah, I keep banging this whole thing around. The astronaut couch, once these are put in place, the astronaut couch is supposed to slide in here. And it nestles in here. Put the astronauts in later. Yeah, it would be easier to install this without the astronauts in it. And if you can see, then some of the instrument panel shows there, and then there's a space underneath. It doesn't look like much, and it isn't. But believe it or not, I mean, I find this really hard to believe. These couches fold up. They're like canvas folding chairs, really, is what they are. They're like canvas on a frame. Okay. The middle one folds up so an astronaut can actually stand up here. And then they, this is where you sleep underneath there. That's the sleeping compartment. There's actually a graphic that shows how that works. You slide underneath there with the seat up, and you can rest and take a nap under there. Doesn't look very comfortable. I wouldn't do it. Looks really claustrophobic. This whole thing looks really claustrophobic. But I remember that the astronauts who were in the Apollo raved about how roomy it was. And to be honest, if you've ever seen a Mercury capsule, or even more spectacularly, a Gemini capsule, if you've ever seen a Gemini capsule, you would say that, in fact, this really is roomy. The Gemini capsule was horrible. I mean, horribly, horribly cramped. Just impossibly, stupidly cramped. So this goes on here like this. These little tabs attached to the sides of the wall. The attachment points are really tiny. I'm probably going to use contact cement for those because at least it'll grip and it'll hold pretty well. And then you can't really see it now because my hand's in the way. The main instrument panel is right in front of their faces like that. And you'll be able to see the interior through this hatch that now opens because the door is ajar. Anyway, the rest of this assembly will happen when I get the applique of the instrument panel, and rather than just leaving it look like this, where there's tiny little bits of instrument panel like raised surfaces, or attempting to paint this, which would be theoretically possible, but at my skill level not. I'm going to take some pictures of the real control panels and apply them, stick them on like stickers. I'm going to make stickers, and then it will look like an instrument panel that one can look at through the open door that is ajar. Let's see. The other feature is there's a moon surface that I have painted, and it looks pretty moony, actually. I don't know if I want to mess with it anymore. What I was thinking of doing was using some gray wash to paint the insides of the craters, but I really like the way this turned out with the spray painting. When I see it under a light like this, it looks pretty decent. And then there's a little walking on the moon guy that can be attached here. When the LEM lands on this, then the walking on the moon guy can come out. It's got moon dust all over its legs and stuff like that. So I think I'm not going to mess with this. At least not right now. But the Apollo now has gone as far as I can go with it until we get the instrument panel appliques. I can take the tape off of this. I'm going to mark, the light is coming from this direction. So I'm going to mark the inside with an L. I've got an L on the tape here. Say that's the light. In case I wanted to paint this, I would shine a light on this and shade it. But I'm not doing that because of messing up something that's not too bad right now. light is coming from this corner. There. Oh, there's this. This is supposed to be, oh, that's the base for this entire stack. The fairing or housing for the lunar module, the ring sets on there. It's just right size. It sets right on there, and then the whole thing stacks like that on top of it. And if I stacked it all up, I'd have no place to put it. So I'm just leaving the pieces in their boxes. So this, see this gray, this kind of monochrome gray, that's what this was before Nicole taught me how to do some layering and shading. This, I don't know. I really don't want to mess with it at this point. It just under the light, it just looks good. And if I tried to paint the shadows inside the craters, I know I would mess them up. You know, one or more of these would just be really messed up, and then the whole thing would be messed up, and I'd have to start over. So there, I'm going to just leave this here on top of the box. Okay. So on my standard streaming schedule, this is a time I would take a break. So I just might do that because I can't work on the Apollo any further, other than doing some cleanup. I've got a lot of, as you can see, just a big mess. I have a big mess here, made up of lots of little particles from the windows. This is a cool thing. I could read this to you. Maybe I could do that for the rest of the stream. The way this is written, is the hyperbole, at least at the beginning, is really pretty exciting. Yeah, I think I'm going to. I'm going to read a story to you after break. I'm not going to take a real long break, but I think it's really cool, especially the way it's written. Yeah. So yeah, this is the Apollo story, written by NASA, originally published in 1969. It was published right after Apollo 11, and it's written in a man. You would just yeah. Part of it is hyperbole. Part of it is just like detail. It's kind of a weird mixture. It looks like it was written by different people at different times. The type font is different as you go through this. Like, look how, and you look at this, and then the printing, the lines between the printing are really tight. The 3 stages, that whole section was written by somebody who was not into puffery. It's fairly technical. And then you get here and yeah, it's an interesting mix of hyperbole and technical writing. And I think that's what I'm going to do. is I'm going to read this to you after break. It should take up most of that. And then on Wednesday, I'll start the next model. So I'm going to try to take a shorter break. I'll try to be back in a half hour. Okay? See you then. Okay. The break is over. I have pretty much finished the Apollo. All I've got left is to get stickers. Basically, I have to custom make some stickers for the instrument panels, and then I can assemble the command module and the thing will be done. And that's going to be a while in the future because I need to get the right size pictures of the control panels, and I need to get them to the right size and then get the right kind of paper. And anyway, I'm going to read to you, not read you. I wouldn't read you. I'm going to read to you the Apollo story. Okay, this was published in 1969, right after Apollo 11. It's really kind of fun. It'll use up the last hour of the stream when I'm not doing anything on the Apollo, but it's just interesting the way this has been written. It's parts of it are written like somebody writing ads in the 1960s. Okay, just exuberant language, and some of it's just written in real technicalese. But I think it's just fun, and it's got cool pictures in it, and kind of interesting facts and figures and things. So why not read this? So this is going to be relaxing bedtime stories with Dice and Dungeons. Okay, the way this starts out will give you a sense of how this is done. Man, the earth dweller, is no longer confined to the world of his birth. By virtue of his own ingenuity, man has now bridged the void of space and walked upon another world. Apollo 11 and her 3 American astronauts have fulfilled the dream of the centuries by successfully journeying the 240,000 miles between Earth and Moon. On July 20th, 1969, the first Earthman stepped onto the lunar surface. That's one small step for a man, one giant leap for mankind. We all heard that. The vehicle used to carry Americans to the moon and return them to Earth is called Apollo. Apollo is the Greek name for the god of light. Apollo is what, I don't know. It's always interesting how people talk about that. It's like, this is Greek for. No, it's Greek, and it means in our language, but whatever. 3 giant steps preceded Apollo: Project Mercury, Project Gemini, and unmanned landings on the moon. These are all projects. Project Apollo, Project Mercury, Project Gemini. Mercury, America's first manned satellite, kind of an interesting way to put that, pierced the space barrier. In the twin-placed Gemini, an astronaut left the spacecraft and maneuvered in space, successfully testing his ability to rendezvous and dock, that is, connect with another spacecraft. That was actually a big deal. The Apollo flight plan calls for a lunar orbit rendezvous in which the moon landing. What's interesting is that this part was written before the landing because it's written in the future tense. Okay? The flight plan calls for, as opposed to called. So in some ways this was written after, but then other parts were written before. Kind of weird. Anyway, it calls for a lunar orbit rendezvous in which the moon landing vehicle detaches from the spacecraft, lands on the moon, then returns to the spacecraft. Which is weird because the lunar module is a spacecraft, but what they mean was the command module. This procedure reduces the rocket power required for landing and taking off from the moon. The craft not using this method, but going directly from Earth orbit to the surface of the moon, would weigh more than twice as much, mainly because of additional fuel. Another preliminary essential to the Apollo mission was the landing of unmanned spacecraft on the surface of the moon. These landings not only tested the precision with which soft landings could be made, but provided close-up photographs of surface features for the determination of future landing sites. There's a Saturn V on the mobile launcher and the Saturn V liftoff. The Saturn V was an amazing spacecraft. The heart of the Apollo system is the command module, which is the bit that I was just working on earlier today. Here, the astronauts must live and make the decisions concerning their flight. But this tiny capsule, for all its importance, is dwarfed by the sheer size of the rocket required to send it on its journey through space. Saturn V is the first large vehicle in the U.S. space program to be developed for a specific purpose. That's true. All of the launchers before that, the Mercury and Gemini, were done atop repurposed intercontinental ballistic missiles. So this was the first one that wasn't basically a weapon. This purpose is, of course, the transporting of men to the moon. That was redundant. This whole thing is about that. The total cost of engineering and building 15 Saturns and their supporting equipment is more than $7 billion, which sounds trivial now. Anyway, the Saturn V is a 3-stage booster rocket with a total launch weight. This is where it gets technical and boring. But, interesting. It has a weight of 6,100,000 pounds. Okay. The first or lower stage is 138 feet long and 33 feet in diameter with its 5 F1 engines and a full load of fuel. The first stage weighs 4,792,000 pounds, almost all of which, as an aside, is the fuel that it needs to launch itself. So most of the first stage is an extremely powerful rocket basically launching its own fuel tank. The fuel for the engine consists of 203,000 gallons of RP1, which is kerosene, and 331,000 gallons of LOX, liquid oxygen. You have to say LOX. That was the space way of saying liquid oxygen. So it's all burned up in 2.5 minutes, which means a lot of stuff is getting burned, and delivers 7.5 million pounds of thrust, which you might have noted was 1.5 million more than the weight of the entire rocket, which is good because you want more thrust than the weight, otherwise it wouldn't go anywhere. So then you have interesting facts like turbopumps force 15 tons of fuel per second. That's a lot of stuff being forced into the engines as the first stage accelerates to a speed of 5,330 miles per hour and a force of 4.5 times greater than Earth's gravity. 4.5 Gs. That's when you get pushed back in your seat. That isn't terribly fast, really, 5,300 miles an hour with all of that thrust, but most of it is used to push its own weight because it weighed almost 5 million pounds just in of itself. Most of that, which was fuel. So an interesting aside here is that the fuel most often used was kerosene, okay, especially on the first stages. And recently there was some to do about a private rocket burning kerosene as though that was some sort of new thing. But no, it was one of the very original liquid fuels for rockets. It also is basically jet fuel. So you think of kerosene as just lighting little lamps, but it is jet fuel and rocket fuel. Separation from the exhausted first stage, okay, it's all worn out, it's exhausted, takes place at 38 miles above the Earth. And then the 81-foot-long second stage is powered by 5 J2 engines, not the F1 engines, the J2 engines, which consume 343 gallons of fuel in 6 minutes, okay, which is about as much fuel as, that includes the oxidizer, okay? So it's got about little more than half as much fuel as the first stage, but it takes longer to burn, and it accelerates from 5,300 miles an hour to 15,300, which is almost the speed of orbit. The fuel for the second stage, it's hydrogen and oxygen. So this is important. It's liquid hydrogen, which is less weighty than kerosene, but produces more thrust per weight unit. So after burnout, not exhaustion in this case, but burnout, the second stage drops away. And then it falls into the Atlantic Ocean west of Africa. The third stage is smaller. It's only 58 feet 7 inches long, and it's joined to the larger second stage by a tapered interstage adapter. See that? Tapered interstage adapter there. You can see that in the picture. See, it's important to point out that it's tapered at that point because its diameter is smaller. It's got a single 225,000 thrust J2 engine. So there's one of those as opposed to 5. And then it takes it up to orbital speed of 17,500 miles per hour at an altitude of 115 miles. And the engine is operated for 2.75 minutes. I love how this gets very technical here. Then the spacecraft with the third stage still attached. So this part of it, okay, this whole bit down here, you can see it best in silhouette. That all just gets thrown away. And then that part above the tapered fairing, that includes the third stage, that gets propelled into orbit. You can kind of see it in this diagram here too, like that. That gets propelled into orbit, and the third stage stays attached, and we'll find out why in a bit. Okay. So, yes, it goes into orbit about 12 minutes after liftoff. The remaining fuel in the third stage is used to place the Apollo into translunar trajectory. That's why it stays attached, because they need that rocket engine to get it out of orbit and shoot it out to the moon. Okay. So I'll just do as an aside here. That was early on, that was actually a really big deal. Okay. Rockets that launched things into orbit or went anywhere else, the engines started up and then they finished and they fell off. But this particular rocket had to shut down and restart in space. And that had been tested before because it hadn't been done before. People hadn't launched rockets into space, shut down the engine, and restarted them. So I think it was during the Gemini program and in the early Apollo testing that shutting down and restarting a rocket engine, especially something like this that's powered by liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen, was an event, a major engineering feat. So some more technical stuff. Between the third stage and the Apollo spacecraft is the instrument unit. It's only 36 inches high and weighs 4,500 pounds. It is, if you can see it, it's this dark ring there. Okay, that's the third stage, this cylinder. And then there's this dark ring, and that's like 3 feet packed with all sorts of important electronics. As small as it is, this is a very important part of the Saturn V vehicle. Contained in this ring are the environmental control, guidance and control, instrumentation, and electrical systems. And then the lunar module rests inside its adapter. That is this slightly cylindrical bit here, there, okay? And you can see it here. I'll show you the picture. This is the adapter. And this is actually where the model starts. The model that I've been building starts here at this, inside its adapter fairing. That's why I've been calling it a fairing, because that's what it's called, is the fairing. This is the portion of Apollo that actually lands on the lunar surface, not the fairing, the lunar module contained inside of it, which consists of 2 bits. And above the LEM are the Apollo service and command modules. And these are the components of this fantastic machine, which carry American astronauts on a long journey between Earth and the Moon. People had to train for this. This is an aside. Astronauts preparing for the Apollo program take moon trips, in quotes, in trainers that create the illusion of travel through space, sent on the moon and returned to Earth. Okay, these are like simulators. They train on a lunar obstacle course. a 320-foot wide mock-up of the moon's rugged surface, complete with craters up to 50 feet wide and 15 feet deep, large boulders, a dust layer, and fissures to jump over. Okay, that's the simulated lunar surface. For those of you who believe in conspiracy theories, and why not, if you want to, whatever, the simulated lunar surface, oh no, that's where they really did the thing instead of really on the moon. But it was simulated. A suspension harness. This is a cool thing. See this whole thing here? That isn't part of the spacesuit. What that does is it reduces the astronaut's weight to the moon value of 1/6 of Earth's gravity. So they could practice jumping, and leaping, because they only weighed 1/6 as much as they usually did. While in training, astronauts wear moon suits to practice such typical movements as walking, bending, and opening of eyes. So the moon suits were very bulky and hard to move in fact, kind of painful. Anyway, the Apollo, with its immense 3-stage Saturn boosters, stands 365 feet high on the launch pad, 1/4 the height of the Empire State Building. That's probably not a really helpful reference anymore. It weighs 6 million pounds fueled, and the Apollo craft alone, which is this section, which was the model, is 82 feet tall, which is why it's really hard to display this model, because it's not 82 feet tall. I don't know what the scale is. The model doesn't say what the scale is. But let's step inside the command module, the control center of Apollo, and join the astronauts on their voyage to the moon. Why not? You've got a space suit, right? You're all bundled up. You're ready to go. The command module is the only module which will return to Earth from the lunar mission. Okay, a tiny little bit. This tiny little bit right up here. A tiny little bit up there. You can barely see it here. Tiny little bit is over here, just where my finger is, minus the escape car. Out of the whole thing, that's the only thing that comes back. The rest of it's just thrown away. Smaller than the interior of a family station wagon. That's a reference that people don't understand. You need to go to an antique car show and check out the station wagons from the 1960s. They are actually quite large. Okay. I remember traveling with my uncle's family and our family. It would hold 4 adults. Okay, it had a bench seat in front, so you could get 3 people in the front seat. Can't even imagine that anymore, right? There was a bench seat in front and a bench seat in the middle, so you could put 4 adults in pretty easily. And then there was 6 kids. I think there were most of the time when we were traveling, there were sometimes babies that were on laps, but we all piled in to the station wagon. So there was like 10 to 12 people, some of them, 4 of them adults and others sometimes teens, in this station wagon. It was amazingly unsafe. Nobody had seat belts. And we all just sort of rambling around and rolling around on the inside of this. Anyway, in order to make sense of smaller than the interior of a family station wagon, you need to go see what a station wagon is like. And the only way you can do that is go to like a car museum or antique car show nowadays. They weren't at all like SUVs or even minivans are now. A very different sort of thing. Anyway, the command module is the crew's home away from home. Here the crew will sleep, eat, work, and communicate with Earth by radio and television. The double-walled command module consists of a pressurized inner crew compartment, which is a good idea, and an outer heat shield, which was also a good idea. It has 2 side windows, which you might have seen me put on before. They're tiny little square windows on either side of the hatch, and 2 rendezvous windows, which are facing forward. And the astronauts looked out through them, because this is the docking hatch here. So when it rendezvoused and docked with something, they could look through these windows to see if they were lined up right. It has a crew hatch window, and that's the round window there. And that was mainly, not something that you were particularly looking through while you were out there in space, but it was to be able to look in and out on the ground. Yeah, two of the astronauts, in rotation with the third, were a garment resembling ski pants combined with long underwear. That's probably more graphic than we needed to know. When they're outside of their spacesuits, okay, they was pressurized inside, so they didn't have to wear their pressure suits the whole time. Two of them were able to take their suits off, but one always kept it on. Their bodies are completely covered except for their head and hands. Why did we need to know that? I don't know. In case of emergency, for example, the necessity for outside craft repair, the third man is always in a spacesuit. It has accordion joints for mobility and a helmet with a visor. Just why that sort of detail? But it was sort of mobile, but not really much. When they were hungry, the men would drift over to their tiny galley, itty-bitty little galley, and prepare a hot meal. Meat and potatoes, seafood, fruit, vegetables, but not as yummy as it sounds. Each item comes dehydrated in a plastic bag. The astronauts will add hot water from a space water pistol, knead the bag, and squeeze the food into their mouth. Okay, that was actually a big deal. Astronaut food, like with the Mercury program when we first saw that. So the food comes in this baggie, basically. It was like what we would call a Ziploc bag now, except it just had this little opening in it, and it really was a water pistol. It was very hot water that they shot in, because you can't pour things in zero gravity. It globs up and floats all over, so it ought to be confined. But it was kind of a fun thing to watch them squeeze the water in, and they squeeze the bag to mix the water in with the dehydrated food. And that became a thing then too, because then you got dehydrated food for camping, and you could buy astronaut food just so you could play with it, and try it out. None of it was terribly good, but they got their hot meal that way. You'll like this part. On board is a miniature television camera weighing only 7 pounds. Okay, that was actually an amazing thing at the time, that there was actually a television camera that could broadcast, transmit back to Earth. This thing weighed 7 pounds. Now, you take out your smartphone, right? Or even an old VC video camera, an old tape mini camera. These things were like this big, and they weighed maybe 2 pounds or something. But back then, in 1969, an amazingly miniature camera that weighed only 7 pounds. It provided standard Earth receivers with live black and white coverage of the mission. Of course, a color camera at that time you couldn't squeeze it down into 7 pounds, so we had black and white stuff. It can be used by the astronauts to aid in rendezvous and docking, and it can be adapted for full color transmission. It could. I didn't know that. A full color transmission to show scientists the true color of the lunar surface and objects in space. Okay. That was pretty cool. So here's some more. These are drawings, not real photographs. There's an artist's conception of the Apollows boosted into lunar flight by the mighty Saturn launch vehicle. Here you've got the real picture, but no, you have to have an illustration as well. And a blast jettisons the escape tower after successful launch. Blast. You have to talk about it like that. So anyway, now the Saturn booster gives us a 7.5 million pound push off, and off we go with the roar of 1,000 Niagaras. Obviously, somebody else wrote this section than the person who wrote the technical stuff before. On top of the command module, it launches the Launch Escape System Tower. If an emergency occurs on the launch pad, and that's true, if the rocket was about to blow up on the launch pad, it could actually lift the capsule up high enough so that I'll just read what it says. I don't have to tell you this because it says that. The system rockets the command module a safe distance away from the launch vehicle. If it's doing that, the launch vehicle is probably exploding, so you definitely want to be at a safe distance to an altitude high enough where the parachutes to open and bring the module back to Earth. The LES, Launch Escape System, LES, ordinarily is jettisoned about 35 seconds after ignition of the launch vehicle's second stage. So we went from the roar of 1,000 Niagaras to jettisoned about 35 seconds after ignition of the launch vehicle's second stage. Interesting mix of writing styles throughout this. This thing is tracked all around the world. A network of tracking stations, including ships, has been established around the world. One group of stations follows Apollo at launch, during Earth orbit, and again as it returns to Earth, and as the spacecraft leaves Earth orbit and spins toward the moon. That is not true. It would have been extremely uncomfortable if the spacecraft spun towards the moon. I don't know why they said it spins towards the moon. It just goes towards the moon. But as it goes to the moon, it passes out of range of these stations, so tracking switches to a second group of stations whose powerful transmitters and sensitive receivers are dependable for communication at a great distance. So they were big. And 85-foot diameter dish-shaped antennas are those similar to which receive signals from spacecraft, such as the orbiting U.S. satellite Mariner, which is millions of miles away in the vicinity of Mars, Venus, and the Sun. A nice kind of little aside about that, but yeah, it's a big dish antenna, and it tells you where they are. They're at Goldstone, California, Madrid, Spain, and Canberra, Australia. So if you had to be, stationed at one of these monitoring things, out of Goldstone, Madrid, and Canberra, you'd probably want to be in Madrid. I don't know how they got permission to do that. Anyway, they each stand about 1/3 of the Earth's circumference, 120 degrees apart. 120 degrees being 1/3 of 360. That's pretty clever, right? So as the Earth cuts off one station's direct line of contact with the spacecraft, the next station rises above the horizon and takes over, permitting unbroken day and night surveillance of Apollo. Jumping ahead, when the returning Apollo streaks toward Earth at 25,000 miles an hour, the chain of land and ship tracking stations will come back and monitor the reentry and recovery. So the service module is this bit here. Okay. Beneath the command module at launch is the tube-shaped service module. It's a cylinder. It contains the spacecraft's electrical power supply equipment and its primary propulsion system. It's a rocket engine and a place where there is liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen and liquid helium as a compressor that powers fuel cells. Yeah, fuel cells where they combine the hydrogen and oxygen to form water, and which is important. You need to have water on this trip because you have to have the hot water water pistol to rehydrate your dehydrated food. Anyway, that's in the service module. On Apollo 13, one of those tanks blew up, and that's what almost caused that disaster in the service module. And under the service module is the adapter which houses the lunar landing vehicle, and I've talked about that before. That's the fairing. And this picture is kind of backwards. This is the third stage, which boosts it out of orbit toward the moon, and then this fairing opens up, and it looks like it really does. This is an artist's conception, but it does kind of open up with like leaves, and then the command module and the service module turns around and docks and pulls the lunar module. As the ship soars, okay, the first two stages of the launch rocket burn out. One was exhausted and one was burned out. Oh, thanks for joining in. I am reading the Apollows story because I've almost finished the model and I'm not about to start anything, but this is really well written. And it's just an interesting stylistic description of the Apollo mission, written no doubt by a committee because every other sentence has a different kind of style to it. Anyway, as the ship soars, The first two stages of the launch rocket burn out and are jettisoned. And the third stage rocket fires the craft on lunar course. And then, with a tremendous surge of power, it refires and frees Apollo from Earth's orbit and the clutch of gravity. You know, those two sentences said exactly the same thing. Holy cow, congratulations. 10,000 subscribers on YouTube. That's really amazing. That's really cool, because you were at 1,000 not too terribly long ago. But things like that build kind of exponentially, don't they? Like if you get a critical volume, then they start telling other people, and then those people tell other people. And wow, that's great. So they, anyway, and so a year ago, you've gained like 9,000 subscribers in a year. Yeah, that's great growth. You're going to be, you'll be up. Well, if it keeps growing at that pace, then you'll hit 100,000 by next September. And then you'll be a star. I wonder, I don't know. Anyway, that's great. You got 600 in a week? In less than a week. Okay. So somebody really piled on. I mean, you went viral. That's terrific. That also puts a lot of pressure on you to keep doing it, doesn't it? So these two sentences, I will read them again, say the same thing, but Friday was a good day. Maybe after reading the Apollows story, everybody will listen to this as a bedtime story or something. So one sentence says, the third stage rocket fired the craft on lunar course, right? And the next sentence says exactly the same thing, but it says, with a tremendous surge of power, it refires and frees Apollo from Earth's orbit and the clutch of gravity. Which of those do you like better? They both said the same thing. The third stage refiring a rocket in space was initially a really, it was a new thing to do. Now all of a sudden, the lines get a lot further apart here, so there's less text in the same amount of space. The crew detaches the command service modules from the adapter section. The adapter breaks apart. It opens, it doesn't break apart, and uncovers the lunar landing vehicle, the lunar module. As this takes place, the crew makes a 180-degree turn and comes back in reverse position to dock with the lunar module, linking the LEM's access hatch to the crew's quarters and the command module. Obviously. Yeah, maybe. Why not? The service module's powerful stop and restart engine helps the astronauts make mid-course corrections and slow down as they prepare to swing into lunar orbit. And it is nearly 3 days since the spaceship left Earth. So the service modules, the third stage had a start and stop engine because it refired with a tremendous surge of power that sent this thing on toward the moon. But the service module engine is designed to start and restop frequently. Again, a major engineering breakthrough at the time, which was to start the engine, stop it, start it, stop it, and be able to redo that over and over again reliably. Anyway, nearing the moon, two of the astronauts squeezed through the tip of the command module into the top of the compartment of the lunar module. Okay? It makes it sound like they're being like toothpaste. They were squeezed through the tip of the command module. It's kind of gross when you think about it. Called the bug because of its appearance. Actually, that didn't last very long. It was called the bug at first because it had like two eyes and things. But people stopped saying the bug, and they just called it instead of the lunar module, they made it the lunar excursion module, so it became the LEM. So it's neither the lunar module nor the bug, as it says here. It popularly became known as the LEM. The lunar module has two windows to serve as eyes for landing maneuvers and a tubular mouth for entry and exit, its door. This descent stage has 4 spidery legs for steady support after lunar touchdown, and I can say for sure that they were spidery legs because there's spidery legs on the model, and they were very difficult to work with. They were very spidery and thin and fragile. The Apollo mothership, the command module, with its single astronaut in the service module, is parked in orbit, about 80 miles above the moon, and while it waits, circling the moon, the 2 astronauts descend in the lunar module. That module has its own complete guidance, propulsion, computer control, communications, and environmental control systems, which is why it's fairly large, because it has a rocket engine built into it, all with at least 1 and sometimes 2 backup systems. These precautions are necessary because landing on the moon is the lunar mission's most critical operation. Critical in the sense that that's the whole point of it, right? And there's an artist's conception of the retro rocket firing, landing on the moon, and we have real pictures of it happening, but they just have drawings in this because this was actually mostly written and before the actual thing, before the actual event. The final descent. Thanks for joining in, and congratulations on all of your subscribers. That's really amazing. The final descent can be slowed to a feather-like drift of 3 miles per hour at an altitude of 15 feet. I don't know if that's feather-like. You should try it. Try falling at 3 miles an hour and see if you feel like you're drifting like a feather. I don't think so. But if the bug, really the LEM, but they call it the bug here because that's kind of cute, should drop at twice this speed, which would be 6 miles an hour. Its jointed steel truss legs can absorb the shock. The legs are also designed to land on slopes slanting up to 12 degrees or to keep the craft balanced if 1 or 2 legs sink into deep dust. Here we are. The astronauts are wearing their moon suits, but underneath is a special garment interwoven with a fine network of water circulating tubes to carry away body heat. Why do they say this? Over the entire suit is a white monk-like coverall with hood, providing protection against the airless moon's blistering sunshine. Partial radiation protection is built into the spacesuit. That's not encouraging, is it? Partial radiation protection. So, partially, you're not protected. But that was the case. And a micrometeorite cape on the astronaut's back will fend off micrometeoroids. That's why it's a meteoroid cape. Micrometeorites, tiny particles of matter in space, which may rain down on the moon at high speed. Okay, it's basically just this fabric around the back. What happens if you get hit from the front? I don't know. The cape doesn't protect you. The backpack contains a 4-hour oxygen supply, air conditioning, a radiation gauge, and a 2-way radio, because you don't want to get too much radiation. The exploration of the moon takes about 18 hours total. The astronauts take pictures and measurements, radio descriptions back to Earth, and collect up to 60 pounds of rock samples. Okay, that's pretty vague, but that's what they're doing. They're walking around, leaving instruments and stuff like that. They set up lunar surface experiments in which information will be radioed to Earth for as long as a year, reporting on temperature changes, once again, radiation levels, moonquakes, and micrometeoroids. The astronauts are on a lookout for surprises and discover lunar phenomena totally unsuspected by scientists. That actually didn't happen. If there were surprises totally unsuspected by scientists, I don't recall that we heard about them. Maybe they're secret. So this is important here. There's a picture showing the top part taking off because there's a rocket engine inside of this. Another reason why it's large is it has to have complete life support for several days and a rocket engine to get back up to rendezvous with the command module. But then the spidery legs, get left behind. When it's time to leave, the lunar module blasts off to rendezvous and dock with the waiting mothership. The astronauts crawl back into the command module. At least they're not squeezed through the tip of a tube. And then the LEM is jettisoned and becomes space trash. That's it. Isn't that sad? And the LEM is jettisoned to become space trash. The service module engine fires the spacecraft out of lunar orbit. That start-stop engine again in the service module. Okay, so at this point, that's thrown away, and all that's left are the command and service modules. That's all that's left of this entire thing right now. Now comes a task at least equal in difficulty and daring to the lunar mission. Okay, to swing into Earth orbit, the astronauts must hit a corridor in the atmosphere only 40 miles wide, a relatively tiny pocket in the immensity of space. If you aim too high, the ship will plunge past Earth and hurtle into space. That basically means it'll bounce off the atmosphere, and there's no rocket left. I mean, they've used up the rocket in the service module, so that would be a very bad thing to bounce off the atmosphere and go hurtling into space. You wouldn't just drift into space or anything, you would hurtle into space. Too low, this is great, right? Okay, just to make it sound really, really like this is something you want to do on your summer vacation. Aim too high and the ship will hurtle into space. Too low, and the gravity loads resulting from abrupt deceleration will crush them in like ants under a boot. That is, the G-forces of decelerating in the atmosphere would be would crush them like ants under a boot. Oh, gross. And probably the heat would overwhelm the heat shield, and so you'd not only be crushed, but you'd be immolated. Anyway, if you look at the Apollo history, neither of those things happened on any of the Apollo missions. But just to put it in perspective, the accuracy required is like shooting the nap off of a tennis ball. I'm assuming like with a rifle, right? Shooting the nap off of a tennis ball without hitting the ball from a distance of 100 yards. But masterful feat. But in a masterful feat of mathematical computation, the guidance system does its job, which is actually pretty surprising because it has like all of the computing power of an old flip phone kind of thing. The Apollo obediently exercises its last course correction. The service module is jettisoned, another piece of space junk, and the command module scores a bullseye on the narrow corridor. I had to read it that way because it was obviously written again by somebody who is not a technical writer. The small, solitary command module makes its fiery, 5,000 degrees, it doesn't say, but it means Fahrenheit, re-entry into the Earth's atmosphere. Air resistance rapidly cuts the velocity to a safe speed. Relatively space, and bright orange and white parachutes open and ease the module gently downward. There it is, those are the big parachutes. And that's why I said it would be really cool if this model came with these gigantic parachutes, like made out of molded plastic, kind of. That could be painted orange and white and just a whole bunch of shroud lines, kind of like a sailing ship model, right? That would be kind of a cool thing to have, but it would also make it yet even more impossible to store. So this is my favorite line in the entire Apollo story. It would be a bitter irony if this most exciting of voyages were to end with the moon pioneers lost at sea. Who wrote this? It would be a bitter irony if it were to end with the moon pioneers lost at sea. It would be an unmitigated disaster. It wouldn't be a bitter irony. It would be horrendous. It'd be just terrible. But to avoid this, to avoid being lost at sea, like just being splashed down, kind of like Castaway, right? Or Gilligan's Island. To avoid this, a large recovery team stands poised for splashdown, search, and rescue. Ships, aircraft, and frogmen. Frogmen means scuba divers. I don't know if people still call them that or not. But yeah, people in scuba diving gear, with masks and flippers are called frogmen. They zero in on the target. Frogmen ring the capsule with a flotation collar to keep it from going down. Good idea. You don't want the capsule to sink, right? Tied to the collar is a rubber boat. And the astronauts climb into it. I hope they have life jackets, or at least they can swim. A hovering helicopter lowers its hoist, picks up the men, and transports them to a waiting carrier. It's been 8 days since Apollo left Earth, reached for the moon, and opened the gateway to the solar system. So, yeah. I mean, this last bit, that was worth waiting for that. After Apollo. What happens after Apollo? Well, we know what happens after Apollo because we are after Apollo. But let's read what people in 1969 thought would happen after Apollo. Okay? This is what they thought would happen. A 250,000-mile mission to the moon is but a beginning to America's space program. More Apollo landings are planned after the Pioneer attempt. A totally new vehicle under study is MOLAB, Moon Laboratory, an apparatus which will travel 250 miles over the rough lunar surface and provide 2 weeks life support for the astronauts. Okay, a mobile moon laboratory. Do you remember that happening? This big rover-like vehicle that would provide 2 weeks of life support while it wandered over 250 miles of the surface? Well, no, that didn't happen. Gradually, a fleet of specialized lunar vehicles could be ready for Project Moonbase, a permanent outpost with a moon ferry supply system. The first basic staff of 6 astronauts will increase as time goes on to dozens of men. No women back then. Nope, women couldn't go to the moon. But there will be a moon ferry supply system going to the Project Moonbase. Their mission will be to explore a new world equal in total area to the continent of Africa. Why pick that? I know. Most people have no idea. Most people really have no idea how big Africa is in terms of continents compared to, say, Europe or Asia or South America or whatever. I think it's actually the 3rd largest continent after North America and Asia. But anyway, that's how much total area there is on the moon. In time, a large astronomical observatory may be built on the moon where airlessness provides unobstructed telescopic viewing of the outer universe. A lunar spaceport to serve interplanetary traffic is another possibility. What are we? This was in 50, almost 55 years later. More than 50 years later, we have, no doubt, a permanent outpost on the moon. We have a moon ferry supply system. We have dozens of people living on the moon. We have a telescope viewing astronomical observatory and spaceport. Okay, there we go. Nearer to Earth, another Apollo application could be space stations and manned laboratories. Anyway, could come data on weather, land and water conditions to improve communications and navigation, multiply the world's food supply. I'm not sure what it has to do. I guess, looking at the weather and developing Earth's full resources. We want to use all the resources on Earth. Infrared scanning can report crop and soil conditions, and that can be seen from men on the ground. For example, the salinity of the soil in cotton fields in Texas showed clearly in photographs made from Gemini. Probably could tell that on the ground too, by just licking the dirt or watching your cotton not grow because the soil was too sandy. Photographs of South Africa revealed to geologists a rock formation more than 700 million years old. The causes of crop diseases, water, or mineral imbalances in the soil, frostbite, or sun scald might be detected. All of that stuff actually happened, but it didn't have to do with the Apollo program. It had to do with like EarthSat and other observing satellites. Beyond all of this is the prospect of larger space laboratories, with Apollo as the Earth-to-orbit ferry craft to deliver supplies and rotate personnel. That also did not happen. Okay, we abandoned Apollo after there were the 18th one never actually launched. We repurposed the third stage of a Saturn V. Remember that whole thing got launched into orbit, the third stage, because that's what shot the astronauts. It's like, how was it put? Tremendous surge of power. It refires and freed them from the clutch of Earth's gravity. They emptied out the inside and made Spacelab, which was the first sort of space station. But we didn't use the Apollo capsule as the Earth orbit ferry. We did the, we did the space shuttle instead. And that sort of shuttled back and forth because it was called a shuttle. But yeah, we ended up with the space station, but we didn't use the Apollo as the Earth orbit ferry craft. We now have Crew Dragon and the Boeing spacecraft. The Crew Dragon has made like 9 or 10 visits to the space station. Anyway, those sort of are a ferry craft because the first stages of the SpaceX rocket are reusable. Anyway, the spacesuits of tomorrow may look entirely different from the spacesuits of today. If you compare them, that is true, but not the way they describe it. A disadvantage of present spacesuits is that they inflate like balloons and become stiff, which is very true. It's hard to move in, and they became kind of painful, especially for some arm movements. New post-Apollo suits have already been designed. They're hard suits of armor and covered with interlocking plates. Okay? They lied. The suits are not hard like suits of armor with interlocking plates. The astronauts of the 1970s may look like a cross between a medieval knight and a prehistoric reptile. It was kind of fun reading this because hardly any of this ever happened. But, it was 1969. There was 2001, The Space Odyssey. Space Odyssey was 30 years in the future from the moon landing. I mean, if we accomplished all of this in the span of less than 10 years between the first Mercury flight and landing on the moon, why couldn't we have, within 3 times that amount of time, have bases on the moon and Pan Am ferries to space stations? Why not? It seemed quite possible given the rate of exploration that happened, but that didn't happen. But why send men into space? Why can't a spacecraft loaded with electronic devices find out all there is to know? We're still asking that question. Men, not women, but men, make judgments, ask meaningful questions, and adapt to unexpected situations. Machines can only obey. Okay. So I'll read that again, okay, and think about that in the current context of people and AI, right? Men make judgments, ask meaningful questions, and adapt to unexpected situations. Machines can only obey. That's a really kind of foreboding look into the future from 1969. Good way to end, right? Anyway, that's the Apollo story. I'm glad I had a chance to read it because it's just a really cool thing written in 1969, talking about the early days of space exploration with really extravagant language like a tremendous surge of power, refiring and freeing the Apollo from Earth's clutch of gravity. Okay. Or it would be a bitter irony if this most exciting of voyages to end with the moon pioneers lost at sea. I mean, why would anybody write that? It's just so awful. Why did they just say they'll splash down? There's a whole lot of people hanging around. There's got helicopters and ships and frogmen. Why talk about it being a bitter irony? Anyway, that was sort of spine chilling, but yeah. Men make judgments, ask meaningful questions, and adapt to unexpected situations. Machines can only obey. And with that, I will say thanks for watching Relaxing Reading the Apollo Story with Dice and Dungeons. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did, and a little bit of side comments that I made every now and then. There it is. Pretty cool stuff. On Wednesday, try to say it correctly, Wednesday, Wedn. I will make this promise. I'm going to show you all the bits of the Apollo model. I'm going to show you all the pieces so that you can see that they actually were constructed. Probably about half hour into it, because not everybody signs on right at 10, but about like around 10:30 or so. I'm going to waste some time before that. And then I'll show you the bits, including the command module, which I haven't completed yet, pending the creation of stickers for the control panels. And then basically be doing the equivalent of an unboxing of the next model that I'm going to be working on. So come back on Wednesday, see all the bits of the Apollo model. I'm not going to fit them together. Maybe a little bit, I don't know, just to show you how they do go together. But some of them are pretty fragile. I don't want to break them. And then we're going to move on to the next thing, which will be interesting, I hope, to everybody who's watching. So thanks for watching today. Made an hour and a half to get 15 minutes worth of work done on the command module. And I'll be back on Wednesday, moving on from the Apollo story from a time when men make judgments and machines can only obey, back from that time to the present. See you then.